In this session, we will talk about the spiritual intelligence, and in the spiritual intelligence, we will cover the origin, that is how the spirituality has started, then the spiritual intelligence dimensions, different dimensions in the spiritual intelligence skills, spiritual life review, and this spiritual quotient in practice. So, what is spiritual quotient, that I will discuss with you in this particular session, and then we will have the SQ in practice and methods to unlearn the illusions and the misperceptions. So, therefore, in this particular session, first we will talk about the origin of the spirituality. Before I go for this the foreign and western literature, I will like to mention that in India the concept of spirituality is referred from our the ancient literature, and therefore, when even we talk about the Vedas and then the Ramayana, Mahabharata, in every religious our ancient books, you will find that is there is a concept of the spiritualism is there. Many incidences have been mentioned in the literature, and therefore, the earlier sessions which I have discussed with you, for example, forgiveness. So, that concept of the forgiveness is also a part of the spiritualism is there, because when you are taking that is the all souls are the part of a single soul of that nature, or you say God, or you say luck, whatever name you say, but that is a or you say nature. So, whatever we say, then in that case it is a single source of the origin of this universe, and then the single source of this spirituality, origin of this spirituality, it talks about that is the have the brotherhood, have the love, affection, devotion, commitment, and the forgiveness, trust, respect with the other soul. So, therefore, in that case the spirituality is such a beautiful concept which talks about, when we talk about the Vasudhaiva Kutumbam, there is a global village, right? It is the universe is same, all of us are from the same one family, and therefore, in that case it is the that concept of the global family, right, that concept of peace, and that is all is mentioned into the Indian ancient literature, which I will be discussing further also. So, therefore, when we talk about the origin of the spiritualism, so spiritualism is the 1000 years back has been mentioned in the Indian mythological books, Indian religious books, Indian the ancient literature is already aware about this particular concept. But when we talk about in the current management education, so naturally we as a process we have to also refer in the current century what has been defined and how it has been originated. And so maybe the concept nowadays in India is already existing, but that has been the formalized by the different gurus in India and different authors from the Western culture. So, actually I will talk the academically also, and I will talk in the that is the how in India also the spiritualism roots are so deep. That is our part of breathing system. Spiritualism is a part of the breathing system of Indians. And when you talk about the yoga, and that yoga is also a part of spiritualism. So, how it is a spiritualism and how academically it has been mentioned in the Indian literature, Indian philosophy, Indian life, right. and on the this part of global the positivity is due to because of the spiritualism. So, when we talk about the earlier concept of the IQ, right. So, nowadays when we talk about the interpersonal relationships, naturally in interpersonal relationship, IQ, intelligence, ability, yesterday I had talked about the ability, definitely the intelligence is an ability. So, it is, but it has been found that is a success, whether it is into the personal life or it is into the professional life. The success is not because of only about the individual's intelligence, right. So, IQ that has to be supported by EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence, and when the IQ is supported by the EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence, and then lot of research has been done, and later on further it has been observed that is there are certain value systems. There is a lifestyle, like the spiritualism is the lifestyle of Indian. So, therefore, in that case there is something more than IQ plus EQ. So, what is that something more? What is that plus? And that plus is the SQ, spiritual quotient. And why we should discuss this? Because in interpersonal relationship, if you want the long term relationship, and any long term relationship cannot exist without the concept of spiritualism. So, you connect, as I mentioned earlier, you connect your soul with the another soul, whether human being or non-human being. So, that soul, when the two souls are connected, and then you feel the peace, you feel the happiness, you find the purpose of life, right. So, therefore, whether it is a personal life or the professional life, in the both the cases the SQ, spiritual quotient, plays a very important role. So, it is not the only IQ, it is the IQ plus EQ, because at the time of the adversity, what support you, and that supports your thoughts, your value system, your thinking design, and that thinking design is emotionally stable. So, EQ, but as I mentioned, IQ plus EQ plus SQ, spirituality. So, therefore, that spiritualism, that is a lifestyle. It is not restricted to a particular gender, it is not restricted to particular income group, it is not restricted to particular the status, right. It is not related to any particular age group, that is the spiritualism means after 60. It is not like this. Spiritualism is from the birth, the brotherhood. That brotherhood is part of spiritualism, and that starts as soon as we start breathing. So, therefore, in that case, so we have to understand that is the spiritualism is must for the interpersonal relationship, whether it is a personal interpersonal relationship or it is a professional interpersonal relationship, because it is giving you the value system to serve the others, right. So, this is all background about in the Indian context which I have mentioned, and I will keep on discussing with you on this particular issue further with the Indian context and the Western literature also. So, when we talk about the intelligence IQ, so Howard Gardner opened the door to discussion of multiple intelligences. So, it is not only the brain's IQ only, that is the one intelligence is there. With his book Frames of the Mind in 1983, he listed 7 different types of intelligences, that is the linguistic, logical, mathematical intelligence, musical intelligence, then the bodily, that is the kinesthetic intelligence is there, then the spatial, then the interpersonal, and then the intrapersonal. So, there are these different types of the intelligences have been mentioned by the Howard Gardner in his book, that is Mind in 1983. Howard Gardner chose not to include spiritual intelligence amongst his intelligences. So, therefore, if you have noticed, that is the when you are talking about these 7 types of intelligence, that is the linguistic, logical, mathematical, musical, bodily kinesthetics, spatial, interpersonal and intrapersonal, then in that case there is no spiritual. So, he has not choose to include spiritual intelligence amongst his intelligences due to the challenge of codifying quantifiable scientific criteria. Like you see, when you are talking about the scientific research, definitely you have to codify and quantify, because when you are talking about that is the spiritual intelligence, then how will you measure? So, therefore, in that case at that time now there are the measurements for the SQ, but at that time there was no measurement. That is the how to measure the individual's spiritual intelligence and quotient, because you have to quantify that, right, and by that time it was not quantified. So, he is not included, choose not to include that intelligence, and that it is not that he was not aware, but there was no quantified measurement for these for this intelligence. Instead, Gardner suggested an existential intelligence as viable. So, therefore, in the because that existential intelligence that was easy to prove and measure and prove as compared to the spiritual intelligence. However, contemporary researchers continue to explore the viability of the spiritual intelligence, often abbreviated as the SQ, spiritual quotient. So, the Gardner found it difficult to measure the SQ, but the rest of the researchers they continued to identify this particular spiritual intelligence and explore, and to create the tools for measuring and developing it, and therefore, the construct they were continuing to develop a construct to find out the construct, that is the how the spiritual quotient that can be used for measuring and developing the SQ. So far, measurement of spiritual intelligence has tended to rely on self-assessment instruments, and if you see the development in the construct or measurement of the spiritual intelligence, and then we find that is relying on the self assessment, and in the self assessment instrument it becomes important, that is the there will be certain statements, and those statements will be based on certain research work, and you can make the certain dimensions, and on basis of those dimensions we will find out that is the how spirituality can be measured. Dana Zohar coined the term spiritual intelligence. In academics, it is Dana Zohar who has coined the term spiritual intelligence and introduced the idea in 1997 in her book Rewriting the Corporate Brain. So, therefore, the first in 1983 in the Frames of Mind intelligence was mentioned by the Howard Gardner, and in 1997 it is the Dana Zohar has coined the term the spiritual intelligence, and therefore that idea in her book, that is Rewriting the Corporate Brain, that has been initiated. Now, when this term has coined in 1997, and then afterward we will see that is the how that is the academically this term has been defined. So, spirituality is the innate human need to connect with something larger than ourselves. Like I mentioned, it is Indian literature. It has already been mentioned. So that is, we all are from the source of the single soul. We are all the part of that single soul. Whole universe is the part of that single source. That we say God, right? So therefore, in that case, you will find that is the here also. When we are talking about the spirituality, it means that is there is a need. Every one of us, they want to connect with the something larger than ourselves, and therefore in that case you will find that is we are having that connect to that outer world, that is a single soul. It is something beyond our ego, self, or the constricted sense of self. So, you are not restricted, you are not restricted to the single object, right, like this. So, this is I, but when we talk about that is it is constricted sense, it is something beyond our ego self, it is beyond that, and therefore it is beyond that means this is the circle. So, and that many times it is known, and multiple times it is unknown. So, what is the world surrounding to you? So, many times it is the unknown is there. It is something beyond our ego self or constricted self or self. It may be defined as being connected to two components, the vertical and the horizontal. Vertical component, something sacred, divine, or timeless. When you are connected to the divine, that pious soul, and then that particular peace, that the smile which comes on your face, because then you are much above any this stress, and then from any ego or from the concept of self. So now you are seeing from top to bottom, and then you see, oh, it's every soul. Then you become the selfless, and it may be defined as being connected vertically to that sacred, divine, or timeless. So we do not know when that particular the counting has been started. You may think of this as a higher power. So, it is a power, and it is so powerful that our senses will not be able to capture that power. It is a source, as I mentioned, all of us from that particular source. The ultimate consciousness. When you do yoga, you do meditation, or simply the concentrate, and when you concentrate yourself, there you are becoming the ultimate consciousness. That ultimate consciousness, that is, you are introducing yourself to that particular source of souls. And here, or any other language that the person prefers. So therefore, it is not the question, that is what language you do, what part of the globe you are. But when you are connecting your soul to the source, to the ultimate power, and then, as I mentioned, it is not you, it is the universe you find. That is, you are a tiny part of universe, and you are floating in that universe. Your soul is floating, and freely you find the freedom, and you find that is the you are free of all bindings of the thoughts in your mind. You are doing yoga. Yoga means not only physical exercises, but it is the yoga means your body and soul and mind all are getting connected. And slowly your body is going away and you find yourself, you can see your own body from outside. Who? That is our soul. And that spiritualism and that is desiring to connect it to any guided by this particular soul. And that desire is there to connect that particular source. The horizontal component is being of service to our fellow humans. Now we return to this particular world and then we find that is the human beings are there surrounding to us. Maybe at the workplace as a superior, subordinates, colleagues and all stakeholders, or all the people that is on this planet at large. And when you are connecting with them, and that is the horizontal connect. But they are also the part of that soul. So it is not that is different, like indifference behavior from myself and to the others. And therefore that will be the horizontal component to connect. So when we talk about the vertical connect, so we are getting connected to that particular soul, that particular source. And when we are getting the horizontal connect, and in the horizontal connect we are getting to connect with all the human beings surrounding to us. So therefore it becomes that particular part of connect, the connect vertically, connect horizontally, and that is the spiritualism. But everybody will not be able to connect, dear friends. So therefore when we talk about the capacity and ability to connect with that power, ultimate power, and that is called the spiritual intelligence. The academically, spiritual intelligence is the ability to behave with compassion. Dear friend, we are studying the interpersonal dynamics, and in the interpersonal dynamics, if there is no compassion, feeling of compassion, then there is no connect. Then there is no point in discussing this particular subject. So therefore it has to be the compassion to others. But then it is the we are living in a materialistic world and therefore we want to know what is for me here, and that what is for me is there, that is the wisdom. And this wisdom, while maintaining the inner and outer peace, equanimity within myself and within you, in the inner world and in the outer world, regardless of the circumstances. So when we talk about the complexity of the behavior, that complexity of the behavior can be handled with the spiritualism, because here the two value systems, compassion and the wisdom, these two value systems, they are making you intelligently to connect the inner and the outer world. And therefore that is those circumstances of making to connect. How do you connect to others? Compassion and wisdom together form the manifestation of love. So, when we talk about that is the leadership, the spiritual leadership, the concept of the spiritual leadership, it starts itself with the love to each and every human being. The love by the heart which is full of compassion. And therefore, in that case, that will enhance our spiritual intelligence. Behave is important because it focuses on how well we maintain our center. So, if we are able to maintain our center and the way we will be able to behave, stay calm and cool and collective, and actually treat others with the compassion and wisdom, then definitely it will become a part of the spiritual intelligence. The statement of regardless of the circumstances, because our behavior is based on the situations. If we analyze why I behave in a particular way, so actually I am the slave of circumstances. Circumstances are guiding me, that is how to behave. I meet the people, those who are full of compassion, love and wisdom. How I will behave? I will also behave in the same manner with the love, compassion and wisdom to the others. Therefore, we can learn spiritualism by creating and living in those circumstances, because when we create those circumstances, we are developing the spiritualism in others. When we talk about the love, when we talk about the compassion, when we talk about the wisdom, and then in that case it is becoming that spiritual wisdom. And then finally, the statement of regardless of the circumstances shows that we can maintain our peaceful center and loving behaviors even under great stress. And this is what we admire in our spiritual leaders. I will continue the spiritual intelligence further in my next session. Thank you.